I'm going to share my screen. And once I share my screen, I'm going to use that as a guide for us to start this conversation. But I promise you, um, there are going to be light and fun parts of this. There are going to be some not so light and fun parts of this. I'll let you know exactly what to expect. So let me pull up my stuff. All right. Give me a thumbs up if you can see my slide and only my slide. Awesome. Wonderful, wonderful. All right, friends. Well, hello, hello. I'm coming to you from an organization called High Tops. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about High Tops in a moment. And today we are going to be talking about what it means to be affirming to people of all identities. Specifically, we're going to be focusing in on SOGI identities. SOGI is an acronym you may or may not have heard before. And you can see here on the slide that SOGIE, SOGIE, stands for sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. So there's your little preview of what to expect, but let me get into some introductions. I'll tell you more about myself and more about my organization as well. So my name is Thomas Foley. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Director for Education and Professional Development at High Tops. At High Tops, we do a lot of different things. We have youth programming, youth support groups. We have some really fun events. I'll share a little bit more info with you about. But my job at High Tops is to go into schools all across the state and other kind of youth serving organizations to talk with both youth and adults about what it means to support the LGBTQ community and how to integrate affirming practices and affirming strategies just into your either life as a person in this world who engages with other people, or specifically for educators too. It's like, you know, how can educators make their curriculum more inclusive, make their classroom environment more inclusive, and things of that nature? So that's what I do. And I got into this work because I started my career as a teacher. I was a middle school teacher, sixth grade. And I know middle school is like, often people are like, oh God, middle school, worst time of my life. Which is exactly why I loved working in middle school because, it's a mess for everybody. I was a mess in middle school, and I just loved being there to help kiddos that were at that age. And after I was a teacher, I became a school counselor. So that was my bread and butter. That's my jam. I'm a school counselor at my core, even though I'm not doing it every day anymore. And I'm actually working on my PhD in counselor education and supervision as well. So, I do research related to the experiences of LGBTQ young people in schools. So I am a proud member of the LGBTQ community myself, and I am so happy to bring you some great information today. Now, before we dive in, I want to kind of lay the groundwork here and set the expectation. And I want to remind everybody that this information is absolutely relevant to all people. Whether or not you believe it or know it, you have absolutely interacted with LGBTQ folks before. You may be a member of the community yourself. You might have friends or family within the community. And honestly, one in five, about one in five Gen Z young people identify as LGBTQ plus or somewhere along that spectrum, is what the latest research shows. And so it's just important to keep in mind, no matter your understanding at this very moment, to have an understanding really is an important thing for all people. Now, that being said, I want you to use the language you have. There's going to be opportunities for you to engage in an activity during this time. There's going to be opportunity for you to ask questions, and I don't want you to hesitate doing so. If you're like, oh, I don't know how to say this, I might accidentally offend somebody. This is the safe space here and now. I'm calling it out. This is the time for you to learn. If you want to know something about the community, I'm your person. I'm your gay guru. I can answer your questions. And you do not have to be afraid of offending me. This is what I do for a living. I love teaching. And honestly, if say something that maybe I say, hey, great question. Here's a better way you could say that outside of this space. That's just an opportunity for you to learn how to better say it outside of this space. This is the safe space. So please, please, please ask your questions as you have them. Of course, I ask that we respect one another as we engage in the learning, as we maybe offer our own perspectives, which again, I invite at any time. Um, and I recognize we're all coming to the table with different ideas, different values, different upbringings. And so all that is great, all that is fine, all that is beautiful. We can still come to the table and have respectful conversations. And of course, I want you to engage in self-care. I know you all know we have Tiffany on the call here. There's going to be moments throughout this presentation today that we'll talk about mental health. We'll talk about mental health as it relates to the LGBTQ youth community. We'll talk about depression, anxiety, and suicidality. And if at those moments you needed to take a little break and come back to the computer 5 minutes later, great. If in those moments you want to message Tiffany, great. That's what she's here for. And it's totally okay if you need a break in those moments. So do what you got to do. All right. So, with all that being said, here is our agenda for our time together this morning. First, I'm going to share with you a little bit more about my organization, High Tops, what we have to offer that maybe you yourself would be interested in utilizing, or as leaders amongst your peers, perhaps that High Tops can be a resource for folks that you know. And once you learn about what High Tops does, it might, inspire an idea and go, oh, I think I know someone that might like this. Or at the very least, you'll have this information about what we do so you can refer people our way if you know somebody in need. Then we're going to review SOGI terms and definitions. Now, y'all are young people. Um, I spend most of my days talking to adults, talking to teachers, talking to older people, and they know like sometimes next to nothing about the LGBTQ community. I'm not here to try and teach you all about the LGBTQ community. I'm going to assume that you have an underlying understanding of many things, but we are going to make sure. I'm going to test your knowledge a little bit using, everyone's favorite game, Kahoot, which I'm sure you've all played in school at some point, and if not, it's going to be a blast. So, we're going to do that little review, and then we're going to really get into, okay, what does it mean to be affirming? Why is that so important? How can we be affirming people? And we will end with, oh, and of course, I'm advancing my slide too quickly. And we will end with, how can you be an ally? So beyond employing affirming practices in your everyday life, what are some tangible things you can do to show your allyship to this community, should you be interested in doing so? All right. I'm going to do my best to keep an eye on the chat, but I'm also going to ask for help from my adult friends on the call. Let me know if a question comes up that I missed because I'm looking at my screen and just doing my best. So please, please, please interrupt me at any time if a question comes up that needs some answering. All right, friends, let's go for it. So I'm from an organization called High Tops. We are located in Princeton, New Jersey, but um, we serve folks all over the state of New Jersey, and our mission is to provide inclusive and youth-informed sex education and support, and build affirming communities to foster strong and healthy young people of all identities. That's a whole lot of words, so let me break it down for you. We are a sexual health education center and an LGBTQ support center. That's at its simplest what we do. So we have educators that go into schools and teach sex ed, or they'll partner with health and PE teachers to make their curriculum more inclusive, more affirming, more comprehensive. We have LGBTQ support groups for young people. Um, these are the things that we do at High Tops. And like I said, we do that in person all over the state of New Jersey. And we also have some virtual programming too, which I'll tell you about now. So here's a basic list of what we offer before I go a little bit more into detail. We have weekly support groups for youth and for parents and families. And these groups are specific to the LGBTQ community. So we have a middle school youth group for LGBTQ middle schoolers and their allies. We have two high school groups. We have a group for LGBTQ high schoolers kind of in general, and then we have a group for trans and non-binary, specifically trans and non-binary high schoolers. We also have a young adult group that is more of an advocacy group than a support group. And then we have a group for parents and family members of transgender and non-binary young people. So I'll tell you more about those in a moment. That's one of the things that I really want to make sure you know about and know how to access. At our center in Princeton, we have drop-in hours over the summer They're quite limited. We only have drop-in hours on Tuesdays over the summer, but we expand that during the school year. We do education on SOGI and on sexual health, training for teachers, professional development, you name it. Youth leadership programming. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that too, because I know we have some young adults on the call here. And then we have some really cool programs and services, such as our closet, our lending library, and our special events. So let me tell you just a little bit more in detail about some of the things that young people tend to engage in more so than our adults. So our support groups, here's what they look like. We have our middle school group, which we call Banner. It meets remotely. So if you know any LGBTQ or questioning middle schoolers, I meet 5 to 6 p.m. on Mondays. We meet at that time because during the school year, after school, people are typically home by that time, home from their activities and whatnot. We have T Connect. That's our group for trans and non-binary high schoolers. This is hybrid. So we have folks come in person to our center and we have folks join on Zoom simultaneously. And this group is on Tuesdays. We have First and Third, which is our group for LGBTQ high schoolers in general. And this is also hybrid. So we have people come to our center, we have people join online. It's a very fun group. And then we have Trans Parenthood, which is our remote group, exclusively remote for parents and family members of trans kids. Our drop-in hours, Tuesdays. Oh, I guess we did expand to Wednesdays in the summer too. Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and then during the school year, again, it's more people really just generally come hang out. It might be a space for people to come do their homework. It might be a space for people to come. We have a whole library. We have books, video games, arts and craft supplies, you name it. People tend to just come hang out, be with other queer kids. We have a closet, which is literally a closet of free resources and clothes. Um, Specifically, our goal in creating the closet was to help people who are exploring their gender expression and gender identity to get comfortable with, finding what works for them. And so and other gender affirming products for free. Um, so by gender affirming products, I might mean something like a binder to compress a person's chest, that kind of thing. We give away all of it for free. And our lending library has over 500 books featuring LGBTQ characters, authors, and topics. So, lots of cool things we're doing at High Tops. The last thing I'll tell you about is our youth leadership programming. Our high school groups are support groups. So we meet and we, talk about life, talk about the world, talk about what's going on. We get help from one another. Our young adult group is a little bit different. It's more of an advocacy group. So we have a Trans Youth Advisory Board, which is specifically for young trans folks to help us organize events throughout the year. These are people who are interested um, in advocacy and organizing. So one of the things that they help us plan is our Trans Youth Forum, which is the country's largest, event that is hosted for trans youth by trans youth. It's something we're very proud of at High Tops. And then we have our young adult spot, which is our group of 18 to 24-year-olds that identify kind of all over the spectrum, and they help us plan the rest of our events. They get out and they organize, advocate, sometimes they're meeting with our staff members. We have our young adult members come meet with Congress people, for example. We have our young adult members table man our table at different events that we do. And some of the different events we have are Queer Prom, Queer Career Day, Summer Splash, so many more things. Just lots of fun things happening at High Tops. And I wanted to make sure you all knew about High Tops, who we are, what we do, why we're here, before I dove into any more information today. So I'm going to pause for a moment and just see if we have any questions about High Tops or what we do or how to access our stuff. Oh, I see a question here in the chat. Can we donate clothes to the closet? Yes, we take donations all the time. And if you wanted to do that, you can send me an email and I can help you coordinate with our closet person. For everyone in the chat, I'm going to put two things. Hightops.org is our website, which is where you can find information about all of this. And then my email address, which I'll throw up later as well. But if you have any more specific questions that maybe you weren't comfortable asking in front of everybody else, my email address is tfoley@hightops.org. All right. If there's no more questions, let's dive in, friends. So, we're going to begin by doing a little review of SOGI terms and definitions. Now, I've twice said what SOGI stands for. If you forget what SOGI stands for, um, it's going to be our first question on our Kahoot. So everybody use your device to go to kahoot.it. You can use your phone if that's easier for you. You can pull up another tab on your computer, but you're going to go to kahoot.it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can share the right screen. And once you log into the Kahoot, uh, it is going to assign you, oh, escape, I did that wrong. Sorry, friends. Once you log into the Kahoot, it's going to assign you a nickname. Um, I'm sure you all would be great, but I've learned going into high schools that I can't let young people name themselves on Kahoot. As I'm sure you can imagine, thinking of some of your peers, I'll be hosting an assembly, and all of a sudden in the middle of the assembly, we'll be doing a Kahoot, and then just the most inappropriate thing in the world comes up on the screen. And so that is why uh, you're not allowed to name yourselves. All right. Once I click start here, there's going to be a code. All right, so you're going to go to kahoot.it. You're going to type in 90310, and I'll wait for everybody to be in. Can you hear the Kahoot music, or can only I hear it? You can hear it?
Yeah, we can hear it.
Amazing. I love it. I love the Kahoot music.
Me too.
Give you about 30 more seconds. Adults, you are welcome to play too, of course. Okay, I think I've got 19 people in. Anyone need another minute? All right. If for some reason you get logged off, the game pin stays the same. So it's in the chat. Just refresh your device, go back to kahoot.it, type in the same game pin. Um, let's do it. Let's get started. Here we go. So, friends, this is to refresh our memory about LGBTQ identities, talk a little bit about SOGI. Here we go. SOGI stands for sexual orientation, gender identity, and what? Ah, very nice. Yes. So this happens all the time. We love equality. Equality is wonderful. But when we talk about SOGI, we're talking about identities. And as much as we love equality, we're going to be talking specifically about these three constructs, right? Sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. Three constructs related to the LGBTQ community, related to everybody, really. SOGI. Um, and let's keep going. Let's see how we do. Space Gecko, very nicely done. All right, so which of the Soji constructs relates to how one experiences attraction? You've got to type it in here. The three constructs, think of them. Which of those is about attraction? Spelling does count. Oh, let's see. So sexual orientation is the construct. These are the other acceptable answers, and it looks like, all right, we did it. 14 of us got it. So sexual orientation is all about who you are attracted to, what kind of person you are attracted to. All right, true or false? Everyone has Soji identities. Oh, I'm so glad. People don't often get this right. So it is absolutely true. If I said that everybody has LGBTQ identities, that would be absolutely false. But everybody does have Soji identities. As human beings, each of us has a sexual orientation. Each of us has a gender identity. Each of us expresses ourselves. All right, Space Gecko taking the lead again by 1 point. All right, this one, use it to slide. I did say this once earlier, so let's see who has a good memory or who's a good guesser. What percent of Gen Z young people identify as LGBTQ plus? All right, it's going to show me the range of your answers here. So this is what you all guessed. Anywhere you see a longer dash, and then there's your correct answer. So yes, a bunch of you remembered I said about 1/5. The exact, according to Gallup polls, is 21% of Gen Z youth identify within the LGBTQ community. All right, amusing ferret. And I'd just like to remind folks that being LGBTQ plus isn't a new thing. I feel like people like to tell me all the time, oh, how come there's so many today? This wasn't a thing back in my day. I hear that from older people sometimes. We didn't have LGBTQ back in my day. All right, so let's talk about it. LGBTQ plus people have always existed, will always exist. You can find evidence of LGBTQ identities and same-sex relationships specifically, and trans folks and intersex folks. You can find evidence of LGBTQ folks in every ancient civilization you've ever learned about in school. Um, Legal acceptance has grown in recent times, though we're experiencing a step back right now. Social acceptance has certainly grown for LGBTQ folks. And due to that acceptance and due to that rise in representation in the media, due to social media, we can connect with one another and it empowers people. So that's why you know, more and more people than ever before are openly identifying as LGBTQ plus. It's not that there's, you know, a brand new, a cohort of people and all of a sudden we have trans folks. No, trans folks have always been here, but the rise in acceptance and the rise in representation has certainly helped folks connect with one another and just be proud and out. All right. Sexual orientation involves a person's blank attraction to others. It is indeed all of the above. So, people often feel or think that sexual orientation is all about sex or intercourse. Talk about sexual orientation and the way people experience attraction. We're talking about sexual attraction often, but we're also talking about emotional attraction, psychological attraction. Sexual orientation is so much more than just sex. Um, and so uh, it's just important to remember that, like, uh, in New Jersey, for example, we are required in schools now, whether school is up to debate, because some schools I'm sure aren't, but we're required to teach about sexual orientation in schools in our health and PE standards in New Jersey. And I had an issue with that and went, oh my God, you're going to teach my fifth grader, my sixth grader about sex? No, we're going to teach about attraction and the different ways people have relationships. So, you know, here I like to say this. You can teach a lesson about sexual orientation to preschoolers. I'm not going to use the words sexual orientation when I talk with preschoolers, but there are some really amazing books out there. Like my favorite one is called Daddy and Dada, and it's about dads that take their daughter on a walk down the street and they see a whole lot of different family types, single parent families, same sex couple families, different sex couple families. That right there, just reading that book, that's introducing the concept of sexual orientation. And so it's important to broaden our minds and realize that sexual orientation is so much more than just intercourse. All right, you can pick more than one here. Pick more than one here. A pansexual person may be attracted to whom? Once you pick your options, oh, there we go. Oh, I think I might have lost connection for a moment there. Did I freeze? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. We can hear
Uh,
you.
that was a bummer. I feel like not everyone got the opportunity to answer that because I think I lost connection for a moment. Um, but everyone who did answer got it right. Pansexuality. A pansexual person isn't limited to experiencing attraction to just one or any specific genders. So pansexuality is attraction regardless of gender. It's more about the vibes, more about the person and their personal characteristics than it is their gender. All right, so this identity describes a person with little or no sexual attraction to others. That is indeed asexual. Um, Now, I see some people put aromantic, so I'll just specify here that the question said little or no sexual attraction to others. If it said little or no romantic attraction to others, that would have been aromantic. So, little trip up on the words there. And I like to remind folks that there is a whole spectrum of ace identities as well. So, for anyone that doesn't know, asexual is often just shortened to ace. So, if a person says, "Oh, I'm ace," it's likely meaning that they're on the asexual spectrum. And asexual is indeed a word that many people use to describe their experience or lack of experience of attraction. But there's a whole bunch of identities that fall within this category too. You can see two of them on the screen here, like gray sexual and demisexual. These are similar terms, but again, it's all about the words that a person feels comfortable using. So whether or not two terms are similar or can be used interchangeably, if a person says, "Hey, this is how I identify," it's our duty to simply affirm and respect that. So gray sexual means mostly asexual, but maybe experiences attraction under specific circumstances, whereas demisexual means that sexual attraction can be experienced once there's a stronger emotional bond formed. So these are just two examples of identities on that ACE spectrum. All right. So this word is a word that gives us an evolved, or the meaning of this word is attraction to two or more genders. Two or more genders. There's a couple different words that could work here, but use that context clue of two or more genders. The evolved word is bisexual. Yeah, so bisexuality kind of historically meant attraction to men and women. But we know that there are more people than just men and women. And as our understanding evolves, so do words. This is how words work. We give meaning to them as people. There's no kind of set specific thing. And so the definition of bisexuality has evolved to mean attraction to two or more genders. And there are other words that mean attraction to multiple genders too. Um, if we want to get, into more advanced terminology, but we'll keep it a little more basic right now. All right, so this term describes a person who has a penis and a uterus. Very good. All right, so if you've heard the longer version of the acronym, LGBTQIA, the I stands for intersex, but I need you to listen here. There are some important things I want you to know here. There are many different ways a person can be intersex. There's actually 42 different diagnoses. So not every intersex person has a penis and a uterus. That's just one example of an intersex person. What's also important to remember is that not every intersex person identifies within the LGBTQ community. Many intersex people live their lives as the men or women they know themselves to be. Some intersex people do indeed identify as non-binary. So again, it's all up to a person. The words a person is using to describe themselves, a person's comfort level with their involvement within any particular or given community. And as I shared, there are 42 different diagnoses, but the general definition of what it means to be intersex is to be born with characteristics that are often associated with the male or female sex, to be born with a combination of both. So that could present physically, or it could simply be hormonal or chromosomal. Now, what do you think is the prevalence of people who are born intersex? Yeah, this one's kind of surprising. It's more prevalent than you might think. It's one in about 2,000 births results in an intersex child. Some people and their families know from birth that they're intersex. Others don't. As I said, it could be hormonal. So for some people, they don't discover that they're intersex until the onset of puberty. For some people, they might not discover that they're intersex until maybe they go to have biological children of their own and realize that they don't have the mechanisms they thought they did to do so. And for a visual comparison of just like, oh, how many people is that in this world? The amount of intersex people in this world is almost equal to the number of natural born redheads. So like think about how many natural born redheads you've ever met. That's probably how many intersex people you've met in your life too, but you might never know it. All right. So when a person's sex assigned at birth matches who they know themselves to be, what's the word for that? Your sex assigned at birth is the same as how you identify to this day. That is cis or cisgender. So cis is a Latin root word that means same. For people who are cisgender, they identify the same way they were assigned at birth. What do I mean by assigned at birth? It simply means, whether that was via ultrasound with an ultrasound tech or a nurse, or whether it was when you were born and the doctor says it's a boy or it's a girl. That's typically determined by a person's genitalia. We know gender is more complicated than that now, but people are still assigned at birth in accordance to their genitalia. If you identify the same way as you were assigned at birth, you would be cisgender. True or false? Ah, non-binary is a transgender identity. I almost feel like this question isn't fair. So let's talk about it. So, um, many non-binary folks identify within the trans community. Now, I want to show you why. There's going to be a visual on the screen here. All right. So we see our big trans umbrella here. Uh, Transgender, at its core, the definition is your sex assigned at birth does not match who you know yourself to be. In that way, non-binary people fall within that definition, fall within that umbrella, because non-binary people were also often assigned male or female at birth, but identified differently. So in that way, it falls into the trans community. But here's what I will say. Some non-binary people um, of, are proud and say that they're part of the trans community. Other non-binary people say, nope, I'm non-binary. Transgender is a different thing. Again, it comes down to a person's own interpretation and preference because this is all about respecting each other and doing our best to understand each other. So while I'm giving you the technical definition, While I'm saying that non-binary is a trans identity, it's important to know that some non-binary people won't identify within the trans community. Now, under this trans umbrella, you see our trans binary identities, trans women and trans men. Let's just break it down real quick. A trans woman is someone who was likely assigned male at birth, who lives their life as a woman. A trans man is someone who was likely assigned female at birth and lives their life as a man. And then for non-binary folks, there is a whole ton of different ways people can experience gender. Um, non-binary itself is the most common term used, but gender queer, gender fluid, these are common terms as well. Then you have terms that are more specific to different cultures. So two-spirit is a term that is used by people of indigenous descent, Native Americans, for example, that identify kind of in that way. You can think of it as non-binary, but the specific experience being had by a person of indigenous descent. Um, there's a whole lot of different things we could get into, but those are the most common ones. Now, which of these identities is not a binary identity? Yeah, so binary simply means system of two, men and women, when we think about gender. So while a cisgender man isn't necessarily a part of the LGBTQ community, or can be, yes, I'm a cisgender man and I'm gay, right? But while a cisgender man, we don't often equate it with binary, non-binary. It's a binary identity, it's a man. And in that same way, a trans man, that's a binary identity, that's a man. A trans woman is a woman, binary. Gender fluid, something other than the system of two, non-binary. I feel like ferret, elk, and sloth, you've been, back and forth, one, two, three. Let's see how we do. All right, gender expression is it a good indicator of sexual orientation? A good indicator of gender identity? Is it how we express our gender to others by our outward appearance, or is it all of those things? People love to pick all of the above when it's an option, but in this case, it was not the correct option. So gender expression is simply how we express ourselves to others through our outward appearance. You can't look at a person and go, I know who that person's attracted to. Now, there are stereotypes and we often make assumptions, but are those stereotypes going to hold true in every situation? Absolutely not. So, gender expression is not always a good indicator of sexual orientation. Gender expression is often a good indicator of gender identity, but once again, you can have a person, for example, here's one example, a person who to you looks effeminate, who is dressed effeminately. That person might be non-binary for all you know, or might experience gender as non-binary. So gender expression is not always a great indicator of a person's gender identity either. Expression is simply that. What's the best way to determine a person's pronouns? Y'all are fast. Oh, unanimous. Wonderful. Yeah, the only way to be certain is if you hear it right from a person's mouth. We often make assumptions. Sometimes those assumptions are correct, sometimes they're not. So you run the risk of being wrong if you make that assumption. When you hear it directly from a person, you know you're going to be right. That's why whenever I meet new people, I do use my pronouns. I say, oh, I'm Thomas, he, him, or they, them is fine with me. Um, that can be uncomfortable. I'm not saying you have to do that in every situation you're in, but here's what I'll say. If you do that, one, people will know how to refer to you. And two, it'll let the other people you're conversing with know that you're open to hearing their pronouns. So automatically you're sending a signal that you are a respectful person. So it's just a good thing to get into the habit of doing, especially in like group settings or times when you're like meeting new people that you're going to interact with on a regular basis. Which of these is not a form of gender expression? Yeah, yeah. When we think of expression, we often think about the outward appearance piece of it all. Name and pronouns is actually included in expression. It's an outward expression of who we are. Um, a, a person's choice in partner might not have anything to do with the way they choose to dress or be referred to. There is no gender neutral title like Mr. or Miss or Mrs. True or false? That is false. So let's see what some of those titles are. Mix, MX period. So I go by Mr. Foley when I work with like really young kids. You all can call me Thomas. Um, but if I were non-binary, for example, maybe I might go by Mix Foley. There are other teachers that are non-binary that I know that just use teacher, so like Teacher Foley. Um, Also, there's just like going by the last name in general, so dropping the honorific entirely and just going Foley. Like I know teachers that do all three of these things. And then, of course, when you get into like higher academia and whatnot, doctor and professor are neutral themselves. All right, you're going to drag and drop in order. LGBTQ youth report that they find acceptance most where and least where in these three things. Very nicely done. Yeah. So, um, you know, I think there are both positives and negatives to the fact that people are finding the most acceptance online. I think people can build amazing and wonderful and beautiful communities online. We can meet lifelong friends online. This is something unique to, maybe beginning with the millennial generation and beyond, or younger millennial generation and beyond. Um, and that can be a really great thing. Can also be something we need to be aware of navigating safety and whatnot. But that being said, we tend to find each other online more so than we do in our real lives, LGBTQ people. Um, School is another place that is a mixed bag. Some kids report, oh, I can be myself at school, but I can't be myself at home. Home is the place where most LGBTQ kids feel that they cannot be themselves or their whole authentic selves. We'll talk more about that when I present some information later. Just a little pride flag trivia. Which pride flag's this? What community does this flag represent? It is, if you can't see, it's light blue, light pink, and white. That is the trans pride flag. And just for fun facts here's some other Pride flags. There's a whole bunch. Pride Month was in June. We celebrate Pride all year round in this household. But you might be at a Pride event, you might see a bunch of different flags. Some of the most popular being the Progress Pride flag in general. That's the rainbow one down toward the bottom. The trans Pride flag, the bi Pride, the non-binary flag, the lesbian flag. These are the ones I tend to see most often. And our last question here. What percent of students report that there was no LGBTQ inclusion in their school curriculum? This is nationwide, not just New Jersey. So these were your guesses. Nice. Some of you really got close there. 73% of young people said that they had never had any sort of LGBTQ inclusion within their curriculum, which is a devastatingly high number. All right, I'll let you brag for a moment. Let's see our podium here. If you want to give yourself a shout out, clever sloth, very nicely done. Amazing elk, and what is it? Clever piranha, I think it was. Claps to you. Very nicely done, friends. Space gecko, amusing ferret, honorable mention. All right, I'm gonna stop my share. And friends, we at this moment, why don't we take a short break for anyone who needs to use the restroom, get some steps in. I have 10:58 on my screen. Let's come back at 11:03. 11:03. See you in a moment. And for many of you, maybe close to home, but the Philly Pride flag. Amber Hikes is this amazing LGBTQ advocate. She served as, I forget her exact title, but she served the city of Philadelphia in their Office of LGBTQ Affairs, I believe. And it was being recognized by the members of the community in Philadelphia, specifically, but also on a national level. Like people were recognizing that the experiences of Black and Brown members of the LGBTQ community were very different than the experiences of white members of the LGBTQ community. And so they made a conscious effort to bring light to that, to emphasize the unique experience and the necessary acceptance and advocacy for Black and Brown members of the LGBTQ community. So that's when that rainbow flag with the black and brown stripe came out in 2017, right out of Philly. And then like Nike picked it up and MTV picked it up, and they were all like, yeah, we got to get on this bandwagon because this is exactly the right idea. And now we have the version of the flag we have today, which incorporates the full rainbow with the black and brown stripe, and with also the trans flag. So we have the rainbow, and then we have like a triangle of the trans pride flag colors, the black and brown stripe, and we have the purple circle in the yellow is a part of the pride flag today too, which is intersex pride. So I think, the goal is to be as inclusive and to recognize as many people as possible. I thought that was really cool to come out of Philly, and I was living there at the time. I was like, yes, this is amazing. I remember like unveiling of it. I think there was a drag queen there. Her name was Icon Ebony Fierce. And I was like, yes, she is. She is an icon and she is fierce. And if you've never seen a drag performance before, friends, once you get to the age where you're allowed to go to drag performances, highly encourage it.
Yeah,
Also,
wait. Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
I was
Ariel.
going to say a lot of libraries do drag story time too.
Hmm.
I'm a toddler
Hmm.
mom, so just putting that out there, but could be accessible to everyone at their libraries.
Yeah, and I know like a lot of you going to college next year, so definitely I know Rutgers, the dorm that I was an RA at Demarest, we always had drag shows and it was so much fun. But about the Pride flag, I think that's awesome. I had no idea that that came out of Philly. Like I think that's really cool. Thomas, I don't know if you listen to Matt Bernstein, but he's like okay, yeah, you know
Uh-huh.
him, but he did a whole like a YouTube video essay about like the pride flags and like the history of them, which is really cool. But yeah, I don't think he mentioned like the Philly one, but that's really cool.
It is so special. Yeah. And what a great person to follow on IG too, just keeping people informed. Well, awesome. I'm so glad you're all back, friends. I've got some great info to share with you for our remaining time today before I share my screen again. How we doing? Can I see some smiles? Doing good. Does anyone have any questions? Did anything catch you off guard with the Kahoot? Are you like, Mr. Foley, I want to fight you right now because you're wrong about that? Anyone like, oh, I need to know more about that? If there's anything you're feeling, thinking you want to know more about, throw it in the chat at any point. I'm going to keep rolling with the info now, but we're going to come back to whatever I see in the chat in a little bit, okay? All right. I'm going to reshare my screen. I'm going to do this. All right. We did our little review. We're all up to speed. I imagine many of us, I mean, you guys killed that Kahoot. It was amazing. Many of us knew a lot of that information already. Maybe it was a nice refresher. And for some of you, maybe you learned a little bit, which was exactly the goal. So now let's dive into, honestly, the most important thing about the information I'm presenting to you today. You don't need to know, memorize, remember LGBTQ identities, all of them. It's impossible. An out and proud member of the LGBTQ community. I've been an out and proud member for most of my life, and there are still terms and words and definitions that I'm like, what? That's new to me. I didn't know that. I learn every day. That's perfectly okay. What's more important is that you are receptive to learning new information. You are kind and respectful to anyone, no matter their identity. And so we're going to talk about what it means to be affirming and why it's so important to be affirming. To be affirming is to acknowledge and accept someone's identity right when they tell you. And it's believing someone when they tell you who they are, even if or when it changes. At High Tops, we define what it means to be affirming in this way for very specific reason. It's because our young people have shared their experiences with us, and they're not receiving that immediate recognition. People aren't meeting them where they're at when they say, this is how I'm feeling in this moment. So take, for example, maybe a middle schooler or high schooler comes out of the closet and says, hey, I think I'm trans. A wonderful response would be like, oh my God, thank you so much for telling me. Thank you for trusting me with that. What can I do to support you? Right? That's the ideal. But more often, people are hearing something like, no, know that this is just a phase. They're hearing, are you sure? That's not very affirming. Two of the key components of that definition of affirming is believing someone right when they tell you. Now, that's not to brush past the point that sometimes we do experiment. Sometimes we do go through phases. I know I came out as bisexual in seventh grade. Friends, I've never had a girlfriend successfully in my life. I am not bisexual. I am gay. But that for me maybe felt safer at the time in the community I was in. And, you know, despite me having landed on being a gay person, in that moment of coming out, I don't want someone to tell me, no, you're not bisexual, you're gay. Or, I don't know about that. What I need to hear from someone is, okay, thanks for sharing how you're feeling. Let me know if I can do anything or if anything changes. Because that keeps the conversation open. It lets me know I'm supported. And it does recognize that we grow, we learn, we can change. Um, and so here are just some affirming practices you could consider integrating into your daily life to show people around you that you are an accepting and affirming person. Normalize introducing yourself with pronouns. I already mentioned this. It might feel awkward in certain contexts. I'm not telling you you have to do it with every new person you meet, but particularly learning spaces, particularly in queer spaces, this is a great practice to employ. Thomas, he, him, it's as simple as that. And it lets other people know how to refer to you, and it lets other people know that you are open to hearing their pronouns. Another thing I encourage you to do is to take stock of your own assumptions. We all are aware of stereotypes to some degree. Um, Clock yourself when you have an automatic thought. We all have them, right? Okay, everyone, in your head right now, I want you to picture, I want you to picture a lesbian. You all had a picture of something in your head right now, whether that's an accurate depiction or not. Like, it's like we all have ideas of what a person should look like. So next time you hear picture a lesbian, you're going to have picture what you picture automatically. And then I want you to walk back and go, oh, nope, nope, nope. Not every lesbian looks this way. Some lesbians look like this, some look like this, some look like this. Because no stereotype is true across the board, friends. So just walk back from those assumptions and certainly don't voice them out loud. Use gender inclusive language as much as possible. I'm putting a pin in that. We're going to come to it on the next slide. And advocate. You are young, you have voices, you are leaders amongst your peers. Advocate, whether that be for gender inclusive space offerings like gender neutral restrooms, whether that be for policies at your school like inclusive dress codes. Use your voice to stand up for others who might not be safe doing so. Now, Inclusive language. Let's just do a run through here. Some of these are easy and obvious, others are not. Good morning, boys and girls. How many of you as a little kid heard your teacher say that every day? Good morning, boys and girls. Yeah. Some of those boys and girls are going to grow up to realize they are not a boy nor a girl, right? But automatically, right at that very early age, we're putting it right in there. So, something I encourage people to do when you enter a room and you're greeting everybody, students, everyone, friends, what's up, friends? Not what's up, guys and gals. It's just limiting because non-binary people exist too. You look so handsome. You look so pretty. These are great words. I'm not telling you not to use them, especially if you know they're going to make a person feel good. But not everyone is going to feel good with what we call gender-coded language. And so you can get the same message across by simply saying, ah, you look awesome. You look amazing. Just be aware that some words are unfortunately gender-coded. We don't typically call girls handsome. We don't typically call boys pretty. Things are changing as time evolves, but to many, these are still coded words. So just to have that recognition is important. But again, not telling you you can't use these words, especially if you know someone's going to like it. This is my son or daughter. A lot of parents ask me all the time, what do I do? This is my child. It's the same damn thing. Uh, a maiden name can be a family name. A fireman is, of course, a firefighter. Ladies and gentlemen, everybody, mom and dad, parent, guardian, caregiver. Pregnant women. Here's one. Let's talk about it. There are people that are not women that can be pregnant. Now, only a person with a uterus can be pregnant, but transgender men might have a uterus. Non-binary people might have a uterus. And so, pregnant people is a more inclusive term. And feminine products, when we refer to these products, they're often called feminine products. But hygiene products or menstrual supplies are a more inclusive way to say something like that. And there's hundreds of more examples we can get into, but just consider walking in your daily life, how can I broaden this? How can I make it more inclusive? Now, this is where we're going to get into some mental health data. So again, do what you got to do, take care of yourself. Message Tiff or Tiffany if you are feeling the need to do so. Um, but here's the why. Why is it so important to be affirming of all youth and particularly LGBTQ youth? Well, I'm going to show you some data that relates to depression, bullying, and truancy at school. Big data set here. 180,000 kids were surveyed, kids of all identities. And depression is a major concern amongst youth across the board. Over a quarter of young people report experiencing symptoms of depression. Rates of depressive symptoms double for LGBTQ young people. Rates of bullying almost triple for trans kids. And of course, if you're feeling depressed, if you're being bullied or harassed at school, what are you going to do? You're going to skip school. You're not going to want to go to school. You're not going to feel safe at school. And so we see high rates of truancy amongst LGBTQ young people. And that also comes with, on average, again, this is not the case for every LGBTQ young person, but on average, LGBTQ people have lower GPAs, are less likely to graduate high school, are less likely to pursue a post-secondary education. That's the national average. There are pockets of places in our country where it's actually flipped and LGBTQ people are higher achieving academically, and there's whole, lots of implications and reasons that might be too. So it really does depend on where you are. Context matters, but the national average, this is what is reflected in the data. And of course, suicidality, a major concern, exponentially experienced more by LGBTQ young people, and particularly, again, trans young people. And we also see an overrepresentation of LGBTQ people amongst unhoused youth. Again, could be for many reasons. We have young people that are kicked out of their homes still to this day in the year 2025. We have young people that are forced to run away from their homes due to abusive situations, due to not being accepted or affirmed for who they are. And so, you know, base level, these are just two slides sharing some information with you. This is why it's so important. This is why I do the work I do, because it's my goal to make the world a better place for any and everyone, and particularly for members of my own community. And so recognize this and know what's going on. That's kind of the first key and first step to allyship. Here's just a little snapshot of why it's so important to be for families to be affirming of queer youth. Respecting chosen pronouns within the home reduced suicide attempts by 50%. So like this is a statistic I like to share with like siblings of trans kids. It's like, yes, I'm aware you knew your sibling as one name and by this set of pronouns for your whole life. But that doesn't give you a pass to not respect or affirm their newfound identity. It's really important within the home that families do their best to affirm um, their trans person if they have one in their home. But again, let me be real with y'all. It takes time and it's a process and it's a learning curve, right? So like all of it can be true at once. I think families need support for, helping them understand. And I think trans kids need support for the very obvious reasons I just shared. Why is it so important that schools are affirming? Just one snapshot here. 40% fewer LGBTQ youth attempted suicide in affirming schools than in non-affirming schools. That's huge for a school to simply accept, acknowledge, is going to save lives. Now, what makes an affirming school? Here are the four things that make an affirming school. It's inclusive curriculum, supportive educators, protective policies, and student club. Social studies, wherever appropriate, wherever it makes sense. And it makes sense in a lot of different places, a lot more places than many people kind of choose to think or believe. Supportive educators, this can be out educators or it could be vocal allies. They have the same impact on young people. It's like, okay, a person of influence, a person in a position of power, a teacher, administrator, using their voice to be supportive positively impacts the school environment. Protective policies. So in New Jersey, we have something called the HIB law. I don't know if people are familiar with, but it's harassment, intimidation, and bullying. And it's a comprehensive anti-bullying law. And it does include protections surrounding sexuality and gender. So in New Jersey, we have this written into our state law, protective policies. It's not the case in every state. Um, and then supportive student clubs, a GSA, Gender and Sexuality Alliance. Back when I was growing up, they called them gay straight alliances, and that kind of language has shifted in most places to be more inclusive. But a GSA is always going to positively impact a school environment. Now, focusing still on schools and what's happening for LGBTQ young people in our country, generally, schools are hostile places for LGBTQ students. They experience homophobic, transphobic remarks, not only from other students, but from their teachers. I'm the first person here to tell you that. Just because an adult is in a position of power or a position of influence doesn't make them a good person automatically. I think adults have to demonstrate and do the work and provide that model for kids to be nice. And unfortunately, in recent years, homophobia and transphobia from teachers has increased. Now, that can be attributed to the socio-political climate we're in and the fact that people are feeling empowered to voice anti LGBTQ sentiments more than ever. But this is resulting in students dropping out of school or not going to school. And as I shared before, 72% of students reported no LGBTQ topics in any of their classes. So this is just the reality. And again, further demonstrates the importance of being affirming. So students are reporting that they feel unsafe or uncomfortable at school, and it's largely because of their SOGI identities. And of course, if you're being teased or bullied because of your sexuality or your gender, what spaces in school are you going to avoid? The gendered spaces. You're going to avoid the bathroom. You're going to avoid the locker rooms. You're going to avoid PE. You're not going to want to play sports. And unfortunately, the majority of LGBTQ people experience verbal harassment. About a fifth experienced physical harassment. This data set was just over 22,000 kids. 22% of 22,000 is like almost 5,000 kids. It is a staggering amount of people experiencing physical harassment in spaces that are just supposed to be for the purpose of learning and growing. Now, I've got some good news. I like to share the good data too. There are states like New Jersey, California, Washington, um, that have mandated inclusive curriculum. And because these states have now mandated inclusive curriculum, we can get data on the impact that is having. And we are finding that inclusive curriculum reduces homophobia and transphobia. Kind of a no-brainer. Like, of course, oh, we're learning about LGBTQ people. Great. I'm going to know more about LGBTQ people. Knowing more is perhaps going to make me empathize more, and now I'm not going to go out and harass people. Like, it is kind of common sense to me, but sometimes people need the data in their face to prove it. And here's the data. When we have inclusive curriculum, the school environment's safer for everybody. Same thing, when a school has a GSA, biased remarks are reduced. Homophobia and transphobia are reduced just because a school has a GSA that is present, that kids can go to. And you don't even have to be a part of a GSA for it to feel like a good thing. Like I use myself as an example here. My high school had a GSA, and this was way back in the 2000s when I was going to high school. The OOs, I don't know what we're calling them, the OOs. But I never went to a GSA meeting. I was like, "Ah, I'm gay, but I'm not that gay," which is problematic, let me acknowledge. But that was my thinking in high school, right? I was like, I'm not with them, which, ugh, gross, cringing at myself. But I knew the GSA was there. And so, in a way, it was still empowering. It was like, okay, like I can be gay, I can be out here because there's plenty of other people that are as well. And of course, when we have school anti-bullying policies that are inclusive of LGBTQ protections, victimization goes down. Now, something that is necessary to consider when having this conversation too is I'm giving you data on LGBTQ people kind of in general, but LGBTQ identities are not the only identities a person who is LGBTQ holds. Um, so basically, I want you to think about intersectionality, which is a word I imagine many of you are familiar with. It's that recognition that, for people who hold multiple marginalized identities, they face oppression at, exponential rates depending on how many marginalized identities they hold. And so we see that LGBTQ youth of color or non-white LGBTQ youth experience all of the things we were just talking about at more alarming rates. Bullying, suicidality, depression, etc. And like take it a step further. Let's think about like an example of um, a trans black girl who uses a wheelchair to move. Like that right there, that's a person with four or more uh, marginalized identities or identities that people would look at and think of as other or different or whatever it may be. Like imagine that person's daily lived experiences compared to, I mean, I'm a cis white gay guy, right? So like as a member of the community, it's so important for me to recognize the privilege that I have in different spaces and to use my voice to amplify the voices of others and to make sure that we are all safe, included, and accepted in this community. The most vulnerable population in our country, like of any subset of people, are Black, trans, and non-binary people. They experience um, they experience victimization at a higher proportional rate than any other group in our country. Black trans women are murdered every year in our country, multiple are. It is so important to for these people to have safe spaces, access to supports that they need. And so if you know, are someone who hopes to be an advocate or an ally, to know the different spaces that exist, to know about different resources, that itself can be a really helpful thing. And then, of course, I think the baseline is for you to use your voice to educate the other people in your life, if nothing else, right? You're not the expert. You know, if someone comes to you in need of a resource, you don't have to be at the ready with the resource, but you can say, you know, I heard of this place, you could go here. Um, just having information is an empowering thing. And recognizing that, you know, members of our community, members of my community, um, are not safe in every space. I use an example of my partner and I. Um, we are fortunate enough that his work and my work brings us to lots of different places and, you know, lots of different cities in this state and then in this country. And there are places where we have to think and assess, oh, are we going to hold hands here? Or are we just friends here? Are we just bros here? You know, these are considerations that maybe you've never had to think about, but maybe you have as well. And maybe you have had to think about them in your own way too. You know, this is not exclusive to the LGBTQ community, so let me recognize that as well. Ultimately, you don't need to know all the terms, definitions, you don't need to memorize it all, but to be affirming is to simply treat others with respect and to do your best to be a good person. It's really what it comes down to. And so, my last bit of information for you all today is about allyship. If you are interested in allyship and advocacy, how can you be an ally? How can you get involved? I've got a couple different things for you. If only my slides weren't frozen. Sorry. Okay, there we go. All right, so the basics, friends. How can you be an ally? The very these five kind of tenets here. Understand your privilege. So that's what I've been talking about for the last 5 minutes. Know what you have that others don't. Know where you're safe, where others might not be. Recognize, okay, because of who I am and what I was born into, this is what I have. Not everything. I think, you know, there are spaces in which we feel or experience privilege and others don't. And then there are spaces in which we don't have those same privileges. I think it's different for everybody too. And I think everybody has places where they experience privilege and everyone has places where they do not. So just kind of knowing the nuance, reflecting, as cheesy as it is, just thinking sometimes or engaging in dialogue can keep us on our toes, can keep us informed. Listen and do your homework. What I mean by this is to know what's happening in the world, to know what's happening for folks belonging to different communities. Um, I'm going to speak more on this in the LGBTQ context in a moment, but this is allyship like across the board. These five things are not just to be an ally to the LGBTQ community. I mean, like, this is how you can be an ally to all different kinds of communities. Speak up, but not over. Meaning, you know, use your voice for good, help to teach others, but don't usurp the microphone from somebody who actually belongs to that community. You know, it is important for us to, I used this phrase before, amplify the voices of those being oppressed. Um, you know, I can sit here and provide you information, for example, about queer communities of color. And, you know, I can present data to you. And I certainly do attend events and advocacy and rallies for queer people of color. But what I'm not going to do at that event is hop on the stage and say, let me tell you all about what your community is experiencing. Not appropriate, right? I'm there. I'll be on the stage. I'll stand in the background. I'll help prepare the data, whatever you need me to do. But I'm not going to speak over someone who is experiencing the very thing we're trying to advocate on behalf of. Um, Apologize when you make mistakes, and you all will. Mistakes are inevitable. I work with LGBTQ teenagers, and I still sometimes accidentally might misgender someone or use the wrong pronouns. It happens. When it does happen, just say sorry. Just go, oh, I'm going to do better. We'll talk more about that in a bit too. And do the work. You can sit here on this call and say, I'm learning, I'm here, I'm an ally. Okay, take it a step further. Ally, allyship is action. It's not a state of mind, it's action. So show up, show out, share information, raise your voice, make it heard. Let's dive a little deeper into some of these. I'm going to start with number two, listen and do your homework. I need you all to know what's happening in our country right now for members of my community. So, right now, LGBTQ rights are under severe threat across our country. So, what do I mean by that? Here are a couple different pockets that our rights fall into and where we're kind of taking steps backwards. Healthcare restrictions. There are places in which people cannot receive gender affirming care. Um, just a quick overview, gender affirming care includes or could include um, medication, such as hormones, could include surgical procedures for someone who wanted to opt to do that. There are places in which gender affirming care is not accessible. Why is that important? Well, it is shown that gender affirming care enhances and improves the mental health of trans folks that experience gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is the stress and anxiety related to your body not matching who you know yourself to be. And we're seeing many states ban this kind of care, banning insurance coverage for that kind of care. And then also in prisons now, we are seeing trans people being forced to um, experience incarceration with people that are not their same gender. So what I mean by that is trans women are being put in prisons with men. And that is very, very dangerous for those trans women. There are barriers to accurate identification. So in New Jersey, we're quite fortunate that we can change our name legally. We can change our gender marker on our driver's license and our birth certificate. And it's honestly not even that involved of a process to do it. There's some paperwork you might or might not have to meet with a judge, and that's pretty much it. Sometimes you don't even have to. But there are places in which gender is basically being defined by one's biological sex or one's anatomy at birth, and able to have documents that reflect who they know themselves to be. And what that does is it restricts a lot of things. Every day you're questioned to a bar. If you're over the age of 21, you use your ID to get in, and all of a sudden, the person you present as, the person you express as, doesn't match. I put that in quotes, doesn't match the person on this ID. And all of a sudden, there's a heated argument, discussion, or you just can't go in. A lot of trans people are afraid to travel now. Um, so, heartbreaking things happening here. Student and educator rights are under threat. There are states that censor curriculum, any curriculum related to gender and sexuality. There are many executive orders that have been put out by the current administration that attempt to do this very thing. The enforcement of these executive orders, that's where things get murky. It's like, okay, can you just say that? And then what happens here? Here's what I'll say. In New Jersey, we have inclusive curriculum, and our Attorney General has said we are not getting rid of that inclusive curriculum. But unfortunately, there are states in which a conversation like this, like my teaching license would be stripped and I could be fined or jailed for having this conversation if there's anyone on this call that's under the age of 18. Forced outing. There are states that require educators to call home if a kid comes out at school. putting that kid in danger because who knows if that family is going to be accepting. And then school facilities and school sports, people not being allowed to access the restrooms, the locker rooms, or the sports teams that align with their gender. Free speech and expression, drag is banned in some states. Like literally, you can't have a drag performance in Tennessee, period. Book bans, a lot of places in New Jersey were trying to ban books, a lot of school districts, particularly, I mean, I'm just speaking fact, so I can say these things. A lot of places in Monmouth and Ocean County, some up north, some down south. Uh, there were school districts that were trying to ban books, and as of December last year, that is not allowed in our state anymore because the governor signed the Freedom to Read Act. And then civil rights laws in general are under threat. So we had a Supreme Court case that was quite murky, the US versus Skermeti, that in one particular instance, not the way the Supreme Court works is not something I'm going to get into right now. But there are now places in which, as I shared before, gender is defined by one's biological sex, which is basically erasing trans and non-binary folks entirely. Um, and religious institutions are allowed to do this kind of discrimination, without any sort of regulation. Marriage equality, we still have it here in our country as of 2015. So it's only been 10 years, by the way, since marriage has been legalized for LGBTQ people in our country. Um, we don't know what's going to happen with it. Could there be a case that gets up to the Supreme Court and then the Supreme Court says, the states get to decide again. We're taking it away federally and now it's up to the states again. That is a possibility. And even if it is, some people feel it's an unlikely possibility, whether it's likely, not likely, it's something that members of my community are thinking about and stressed about, and it impacts mental health. And then, of course, as I mentioned, outside of schools as well, bathroom and bans on spaces. Um, Oh, I love that somebody put in the chat here, Gender Queer. Amazing book. Amazing, amazing, amazing book. I'm actually, after this, I'm going to send out a resource packet to you, Lynette, and you'll have some info and resources to share. And I think that book is in my resource packet. Um, all right, so I mentioned this already, but New Jersey, you can see right here, is in the dark green, which is good. Dark green is good on this map. So this map is by the Movement Advancement Project. It's basically, you can go to this link or just Google Movement Advancement Project. And if you're curious about any particular state, it'll tell you what are the policies in this state. Are LGBTQ people fully safe, fully affirmed here? The dark green have the most comprehensive protections. The dark red have the least amount of protections. In New Jersey, we are not perfect, but we're pretty darn good. We have anti-discrimination laws that cover LGBTQ protections across the board for things like adoption, foster care, employment, housing, healthcare, etc. We have marriage, we have anti-bullying laws, inclusive curriculum, we have access to gender-affirming care in our state. Trans people can change their name and gender markers. There's a ban on conversion therapy. Let's talk about that for a moment. Conversion therapy, putting in quotes because it's not real therapy. Conversion therapy of practices that is used to um, encourage folks to not be LGBTQ. It's unfortunately best described as like brainwashing. Like that's the colloquial term for it. So if you go to a conversion therapist or a conversion camp, which they call them, again, creepy to call something a conversion camp, these places exist. Um, what you'll experience there is typically rooted in religion. It's typically uh, people are isolated from their families, and sometimes abusive practices are still used. And these places are unregulated because many of them are identifying as religious institutions, which no shade or shame, religion's an amazing thing, but some of these religious institutions are using the lack of oversight to now employ these harmful practices. So people are sometimes starved. Um, they're read to or forced to read scripture. Um, like this sounds intense, and it is intense, and it's actually happening in the year 2025. I think it's 23 states ban conversion therapy, which means it's still legal in the majority of states. It is banned in New Jersey. Um, Here's one I love to share with young people. LGBTQ students have the same rights in school as any and every other student. So, the New Jersey law against discrimination protects us, period. Discrimination is illegal. Schools must take an active role in combating harassment. Your school must treat you in accordance with your gender identity. So that means, for my under 18s, for folks who are still in high school, if you have a teacher that isn't calling another kid by the name and pronoun that they use, that's against the law. And so what you can do is you can advocate on behalf of your peer, tell a school counselor, tell a school administrator. Schools must, teachers must, regardless of their personal beliefs, teachers must respect your name and your pronouns. Um, GSAs are welcome in New Jersey schools, and you can't be retaliated against based on any action you take. So I was telling you about HIB law, harassment, intimidation, and bullying. You can file an HIB complaint against another student if you are being bullied or harassed, and you can actually file one against a teacher too. If a teacher is constantly misgendering you, misnaming you, or just as overtly discriminative, um, you can file that against a teacher. Every school has a different kind of policy in how to file one. Typically, it's through an administrator or a school counselor. But it's important to know that this exists for you because once you file an HIB, it's different than making just a complaint to a school counselor and saying, I'm being bullied. It's like, no, I'm filing this. It actually requires the school to pursue an investigation. So if you want action to be taken, that's an action that must be taken. A principal has to act within 10 days if you file an HIB complaint against a student or a teacher. Now, I'm only going to fly through this, the next 4 slides. It's basically a bunch of resources. I'm going to talk about them a little bit, but I'm going to include them in the resource packet for any of you who want to get involved in a more kind of legislative advocacy or activism kind of way. Um, Educating yourself, super important. You're seeing a bunch of links. These are going to be included in the packet you're going to get. But basically, you can track the legislation in any given state. You can check your elected officials' voting records. You can subscribe to journalists. Um, for people who work with others, you can make sure other people know their rights. You can share your own story. Um, right now, it's a particularly important time to be engaging with legislators if you are of voting age, or even if you're not of voting age, your voice matters too. And people tend to listen to young people, especially as young people come out in droves. We have a gubernatorial election coming up this year, meaning we will be electing a governor. And this is a very important time because some of those very protections I was mentioning for LGBTQ people run the risk of no longer existing depending on who's elected. So, using your voice, really important thing. Using your vote, really important thing. Some great organizations to get involved with. The ACLU is wonderful. They are great advocates and have a lot of great information. GLSEN, GLSEN is another one. A lot of great information on those websites. And here you can just see a bunch of different places that if you're more curious about getting involved, Garden State Equality, give them a follow on Instagram. If you are curious about what's going on for LGBTQ people in the state of New Jersey, they post everything. They keep people informed. Garden State Equality is an amazing organization that my organization often works with. Um, GLSEN's great, ACLU, the Trevor Project, this one right here. This is a really great one for you to know if you have LGBTQ friends who might experience a crisis or have some mental health needs. The Trevor Project has a 24/7 chat line for young people. Now, here's what I'll say. It's an amazing resource. And what they do is they help people get connected to other resources. It's perhaps not going to be as effective as seeing a therapist or seeing a counselor. Like you can message this chat line and you can be connected with someone to talk to. They might not be able to effectively counsel you in the moment, but what they can do is make sure you're safe and then make sure you have the information you need to pursue, getting yourself more help. So good one to know. All right. That's just, stuff I'm going to send you later if you want to get involved. I wanted to give you some final kind of tangible tips for today. And the two things I want to talk about, I referenced earlier, the best ways to react when somebody comes out to you and the best way to apologize when you make a mistake. So let's talk about it. We're going to talk about coming out. So first, let me tell you what coming out is. Coming out is the process by which someone accepts and identifies with their gender identity or their sexual orientation and shares it willingly with others. And coming out is not a one and done deal. LGBTQ people have to come out all the time. For example, okay, get this. I have a partner. I'm not wearing my ring right now, but I usually wear a ring, right? And my partner is a doctor and he was doing a hospital shift. And I was hungry. I was like, I know you're getting off at 6. I'm going to sit at this restaurant. Meet me there when you're done. All right. So I go to the restaurant. This was just a couple weeks ago. I'm wearing my ring. I say it's going to be two of us, but I'm sitting there alone. Okay. Server comes over. First thing the server says, I'm just sitting there holding my menu. The first thing the server says, oh, are we waiting on your wife? Again, harmless, like whatever. I'm not going to be mad because I'm not the type to get mad about something like that. But it's that automatic assumption, right? I'm a man sitting at this table with a second menu across from me. And the first thing you say to me is, oh, we waiting on your wife? And of course, I just turned and made a joke and I said, well, we're going to be waiting a long time. Um, and it was a funny moment. But that's what I mean when I say coming out happens like every day. It's like an always thing. And this is the case because, and these are two good buzzwords for you to know if you don't already, our society is heteronormative and cisnormative. People are assumed straight and people are assumed cis because these are the folks in the majority. So we're constantly assessing like, where am I safe to come out? Do I need to come out in this situation? Um, so it's important to know never to out somebody else. Let people take ownership of their own decisions, of their own stories. So you might know something about a person, but don't out that person. So here are my do's and don'ts list. When someone comes out to you, best first response is, oh, thank you so much for telling me. I'm so glad you trusted me with this. Period. Like, thank you is always going to be the best response to someone sharing information with you. And honestly, I give you permission to give yourself a little pat on the back because if they're coming out to you, probably means you're a good friend. Next great thing to do, check in on the parameters. Thank you so much for letting me know. Do our other friends know? Do you need help telling them? Like, is your family good with it, or is this just private? Those are all okay questions to ask, and honestly, pretty important questions to ask because you don't want to be in a situation with this person and inadvertently out them. Remember that this is just one aspect of a person. We all have so much about us that makes us us. Sexuality and gender are just two different components. And I think people are afraid of asking questions. I'm giving you permission to ask questions. Like people love talking about themselves. Like if a person comes out to you and is like, I think I'm non-binary, you could say, oh my God, thanks so much for telling me. It's amazing. Like, what's that like? When did you know? Why do you think that? Those are all great questions to ask. There are some no-no questions, which we'll go over in a moment. But generally, if you're just looking to learn more about a person's life or experiences, or they're your friend and you just want to connect in that way, ask the questions. Give them space to talk. That's all okay. And generally, you can ask a person, how can I best support you? Those are all amazing things to do if someone comes out to you. Here's my don'ts list. Don't say, yeah, I figured. Don't say, duh, already knew that. That's not very nice. It's very invalidating. Let's be real. I'm a flamboyant person. If you couldn't tell, I'm like expressive and I'm like, maybe my voice is a little higher. Some people tell me I have a lisp. I can't hear it. I don't know. Whatever. I'm gay. Very obviously. Stereotypes, right? When I came out, most of my friends were like, it's about time. It's about time. We were waiting. We were waiting. Which is lovely in a way that they were ready to hold me and protect me and do whatever. But you build up so much courage to come out. And it's like, oh, I'm going to tell this person. And then when a person just says, oh, yeah, I already knew, that tension remains. Like, it's like, oh, I wanted to like tell you and then hear like, oh my God, amazing. And then like take that deep sigh of relief. Even if you already think you know something about a person, keep it in your head. Just say, ah, so proud of you. So happy for you. Don't break confidentiality. Don't tell other people. Not your role. Don't forget they're still the same person. Just because a person's gay, doesn't necessarily mean that they're hitting on you, right? I feel like this is a common thing that people are worried about, where it's like, oh, my friend's gay, so now I can't change in front of him. No, that's not how this works. We're all still humans. When we go into a locker room, the purpose is to change and do our thing and get out there and play whatever sport we're playing, right? Everything's the same. You learned something new about this person. All right, here's the no-no questions. Don't ask probing questions. Anything relating to medical history or the body is going to be your no-no question. Or intercourse, also a no-no question. So, trans person comes out. Do not say, oh, are you going to get surgery? That's a no-no question. If a trans person comes out to you and you say, oh, what's that been like for you? When did you know? Those are great questions. But to say, oh, so when are you starting the hormones? No, no, no. We don't ask questions about medicine. We don't ask questions about the body. And then intercourse, if a person comes out to you as gay, um, don't say like, oh, well, have you tried it with a girl? That's weird. That's weird. Don't do it. You might have some pretty nuanced conversations, especially with the people you're closest with. But like, generally speaking, asking about, you know, feelings is good. Asking about bodies is bad. And do your best not to make assumptions. Don't fall into those traps, those stereotypes. We have them. Walk back from them. All right. And my last little bit of information for you. When you make a mistake, here's your guide to what to do. Say sorry. Simple as that. Oh, my bad. If a person corrected you, thank them for correcting you. Oh, thanks so much for reminding me. I'm gonna do my best. Edit your language. Just mean make that correction moving forward. Make it a permanent correction. And most importantly, proceed without making a scene. All right, here's why I say most importantly. I don't even know if you can imagine how often trans and non-binary people are misgendered on a daily basis. Trans and non-binary people are constantly deciding, am I going to correct a person or am I going to just like let this one go? If you are corrected, you should say, oh, thanks, my bad, and then do your best moving forward. What you shouldn't do is, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. I don't usually do that. Are you mad at me? Do you hate me? Are we still friends? So dramatic, so unnecessary. All that does is it puts the emotion you're now feeling, which is likely shame and embarrassment for having gotten it wrong, it puts that feeling back onto the person. Sit with that uncomfortable feeling because that's how you're going to learn. And if you keep making a mistake, do your best to understand why you're making that mistake and practice so it doesn't happen again. This is all about intent, and impact, but the impact is what is more viscerally felt, right? So your intentions can be good, but even if your intentions are good, it can be felt in a harmful way. The impact is kind of that lingering, lasting feeling that a person's going to have. So you can be the nicest, most kind, most gracious person in the world and still get something wrong and still hurt a person's feelings. And you learn and you grow from it. It's going to be uncomfy, but that's how we get better. That's how we become better people. All right, friends, we accomplished all the things I wanted to accomplish. I want to remind you that like every community needs allies. I want to remind you that when we can be more empathic of one another and just better understand each other, we can change things. We can change the world for the better. And so um, know that there are resources available to you or your friends if they need them. Again, I'm going to send over some stuff. It might take me a day or two because I've got some other stuff going on today, but I will send over some stuff so that you have resources. And if you want to find High Tops online, I'll include it in the resource packet too. But we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, and all that good stuff too. And so, my friends, um, oh, Isaac, thank you for your contribution in the chat because you are absolutely correct. Don't out people like across the board because you don't know who's talking to who. Once one person knows and you tell the wrong person, there's a potential for lots of people to know. So thank you for that perspective, Isaac. Um, any other thoughts, questions, things? I know we're like almost at the end of my time with you all. So the last thing I'll say is once you get those resources, if you want to engage in more conversation, if you want to chat, my email address is going to be there. If you want to join High Tops or you know a friend that might want to, you are welcome to do so. And I'm here, I'm around, and I love talking, obviously. So give me a call, give me an email, and thank you for being such great active listeners and participants today. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Thomas. We appreciate you. Can we all give Thomas some snaps, some claps? Yes. Love it, love it, love it. Yes. Awesome. Does anyone have any? I know Thomas just said this, but I just want to make some space for any questions anyone might have. All right. Um, just some really quick reminders before we go for today. Um, do not forget we have our in-person meeting on the 22nd.